transitional? There's no more transitions?
No, that we don't have any transition.
So you move to that model for all three areas? So they are
We
being,
do.
they are being fully included, they're not in a separate class?
No, they're not. They are not. Unless there is a subgroup of students who are.
Because I remember us voting on the schedule when we were going over that last, for the next year. And there were classes with lower numbers in it, and we were told that it was because there was transitional.
It's PTLS, so it's part-time learning support. That is a separate class. But I can tell you right now, that class is phenomenal. What they're doing in that PTLS class at the high school, phenomenal. I think half that class was proficient on the bio exam. So that is the special class, so you are correct. You saw like 8 or 9 students in the class, it's called PTLS, it's a part-time learning support class. So those students have significant learning disabilities. The learning support students identified with a learning disability, they're the students I'm talking about just in the general and curriculum supports. And they need to stay there.
The 504 plan, are there changes being made to help in that area to see why we'll meet with those students, why those schools have left out?
Typical accommodations for 504, students with 504 are separate seating, small location for testing. Students who have 504 plans have accommodations. A lot of students, a number of students, have ADHD, so distractibility. Those are the types of issues, unless it's a medical 504 for other reasons that may be more severe than that. So we do give them the accommodations that are listed, testing accommodations that are listed in their 504 plans. So short of that, you have to look at their actual learning profile. Do you know what I mean?
So you would be
because
looking at
it
that
can
student
have
by student.
Very,
Exactly.
they can vary from year to year who those people are.
One of the issues that we saw though was that we couldn't get homebound instructors, and now we've increased the, what we pay them.
Right.
And have you seen a difference? Have you seen that now we're able to get the staffing that we need in that area because of that increase, or?
This is what I can tell you about the homebound teachers, because homebound is run through pupil services. Every time I got involved in homebound is because we didn't have the homebound teachers and we were looking for cyber options. I haven't had one request for homebound for cyber options, so the answer that I'm going to give you is I haven't had any requests. So I don't know the answer on how many students require it and if there's been any difficulty. But I can tell you it's December and I haven't had one request.
What year is this for the algebra? And, the algebra program has changed too. It's
This is
supposed to
one.
become more, this is just the first.
So 8th and algebra.
Okay.
So we're getting there. And I know it's slow, but there was a lot of work that had to be done. And we are on the right track, ensuring that our students are in standards aligned courses where our curriculum development meets the needs of all students. Because you can have standard aligned curriculum, but if your instructional practices aren't differentiated to meet the needs of all students, you're not going to get where you want to go. So I think I'm so proud of the work for special education in particular, because year after year it would be, they're not making any gains, they're not making any gains. They are right there where we're getting it. And even for, and I'm sure that you'll all be interested to know that we needed a multisensory approach to word study, and that's what you heard tonight. For all students, have to have that. But that's not even enough for some students. Some students have severe reading disabilities, and they require intensive instruction, right? Explicit, intensive, systematic instruction. So our special education teachers have been provided with materials and training in, it's called Fundations. If you're familiar with Wilson Reading, Wilson Reading was designed for adults and adolescents. This program was adapted with the same Orton Gillingham philosophical base and instruction for young children. We need to make sure we get them kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Because by the time they get to third grade, the likelihood that we're going to remediate that becomes significantly less. So we've done a lot of work with primary and literacy over the last few years. So I'm starting to be able to breathe easier knowing that we're meeting the needs of most students in one way, but we have another avenue for students who have pretty severe reading disabilities, because that's a brain-based reality. You can see those on MRIs. You can see that the brain is different if, and you know, dyslexia is a term that people have different meanings for. But a true reading disability, your brain is different. You do need to learn in a different way. So we are there in the primary grades. We're there across the board because we do have those programs for students. So that's some of the work that's being done, that ultimately the whole system improves over time. The AP, so we're all up there. The kids who struggle, we're working with those kids. Data team meetings so that the building principals and teachers know who their kids are as learners. Differentiate instruction so we can meet the needs of all. That's the work that we're doing.
You were talking about carrying over the reading and writing to the middle school level.
Mhm.
What is your timeline for that?
So, we're going to be talking about being a writer. Right now it's being piloted in 6th grade. So Hillary actually will be coming in January for that proposal for being a writer. We're not sure about making need for 6th grade yet, so we are still in discussion about that to make sure that we make the right decision for middle school. But being a writer, absolutely, hands down, all the teachers, I mean, that's the way we're going for writing.
Now, is it going to be difficult for the kids who did not get exposed to it in elementary school and then will be getting it in middle school?
It would be the same thing
as
as not having it in the elementary. Right, it's gonna be better than what they would have had without it. It's a good thing across the board.
And just the one thing you said with the algebra, the kids taking algebra, that kind of explains some of the dip in the regular math skills, and so you're going to be pulling those back into the algebra curriculum. But my only concern with that would be is that we changed the algebra to become, it was supposed to become more rigorous, right? And so I wouldn't want to give up the rigor of the Algebra 1 program to satisfy some PSSA score.
And it is far more difficult that we are finding to do it there than in geometry.
Okay.
So I'm not saying every single thing that we miss in PSSA math, we can do it. Where it's appropriate and makes sense, we're doing it.
Okay.
Okay, we do not want to do that either.
Okay.
And we won't. We're just trying any which way that we can help students. Yeah, well, maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And that was the end of the agenda, which will bring us back to public comment. If you can remember how long, I was gonna say it was a long time ago.
You have to be the full name.
Betty Bundy from Hilltown Township. I have a question for Dr. Bolton regarding the grading system with the plus and minuses that are going to change next year, class of year 1920. So what happens with their GPAs regarding that when they've been on one grading system for 3 years, and then they're changing for, like, my daughter's a junior, so her senior year would be different than her freshman, sophomore, and junior year. How accurate would it then make her GPA if she was on, if she, you know, had an 91 that was worth a 4.0, but then her senior year it's not worth a 4.0 anymore? Do you understand what I mean? So I'm not putting it down, I'm just trying to understand it and how it will affect her.
It's when you think about the class rank index, as well as the decile information in terms of providing that, all of the students within a class have worked off the same set of rules specific to GPA, which is
Right.
what you're talking about. So everyone has had 3 years of the current grading scale, and everyone in your daughter's case would have 1 year of the new grading scale. And so from that impact, there won't be no impact, because obviously the courses you're taking will change that in terms of that. Although all the students will have that information as they're going into program planning, in terms of that is an option for them, because that will incentivize some courses from a GPA standpoint if that's your sole goal in terms of that piece. And so the thought process was everyone within that class will be impacted equally, and that students will then make that decision, and we felt like it was valuable enough. Because the stories that really triggered some of that is a student who's sitting at an 86% going into a final. The current grading scale encourages you to calculate how little can I do to get an 80, because that's a 3.0.
Right.
As opposed to the new
Get
grading
that.
scale that hopefully will say, what do I need to do to get an 87 or a 90, because that will come with a GPA bump. Now, that's tough to measure in terms of the student, the thought process that's going through, and so the thought process was we need to do that as soon as possible. And although it's not a perfect system in terms of 2 sets of rules, because some of these things have that in terms of that change, we felt as though it was at least equal playing field for the years that the students were in it, that we felt as though there were enough positives to move forward with recommendation.
So like my daughter is she's that 89 to like 92 range in her grades. She's got a couple subjects that she gets a little higher, but for the most part, that's where she is. Her weighted GPA was a 4.03 something with only 1 honors class. So that's pretty good. But my concern is then her GPA her senior year is gonna go down. Significant, could make a difference for her, you know what I mean? So that's where my concern was on it, because we're kind of pushing testing until a little later and doing college entry a little bit later to try to boost up her, because she's taking more honors classes to try to boost up her GPA. So that's where my concern was on that. And my other thing is, and I've had a conversation with Dr. Scheid about my daughter, who is a prime example of this whole Keystone thing, and this is why I wanted to just bring this up. My daughter, I just looked at her grades for literature, biology, and algebra 1, and her end of year grade was an A on all 3 classes. And she is not proven proficient on 1 Keystone exam. So how can we say that she is not proficient? And wait, and I'm gonna add too, her freshman year, she got 3 academic achievement awards, and guess what classes they were in? So how can we say that a kid like that is not proficient in those subjects based on just a Keystone exam? So just wanted to throw that out there, because I thought that could shed light on. Now she does have an IEP, and she does have she has a reading comprehension disability, learning disability. So that does come into play, and I think that is a big thing with standardized testing with some of these kids, because they can't understand what is being asked of them and how to answer it correctly. And I think that's my daughter's issue with those kinds of testing. It's not that she doesn't know the subject, it's just she doesn't understand the questions and the way that they're not being asked of her maybe how they were being taught to her in class. So, just want to throw that out there. That's it.
Diane Herring, Hilltown Township. Dr. Scheid, I have some very direct questions because I'm trying to understand the data in front of me. Because I didn't have an opportunity to see it in advance. You have on all of these measures where you've broken out Keystone data in subset groups. The final column appears to say Gen A. Is that the cumulative for the entire sampling? Or is that the kids who didn't fit in within one of those subset groups?
It's just mine is special ed. The other groups are general ed.
Okay, no, I'm
Except
trying to figure out the whole number. Like right now, I've got a column that tells me a percentage for free or reduced lunch, for gifted, for LEP, for 504, for special ed, and then gen ed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, that's,
So where's the total number? Which column is the total for that particular test?
because there is no score showing special ed and general, is that what you're saying? Because general ed encompasses everybody on the page except special ed. The other categories are all general ed students. The only category that's not is special ed. LEP, gifted, and free and reduced is all general ed.
Okay,
And so I'm gonna, well, first of all, let me establish two things. First, I'm gonna try to answer your question, because if you're looking at the Keystone proficiency,
Right.
the slide before that is the total of proficient and advanced for all students. So if you're looking for
Right.
totals, that is all students.
okay,
And so if that's what you're looking for, you don't look at the one that is broken down by program, look at the one that is not, and that is that first slide. Second of all, what I'm gonna establish is this is for public comment. And
right,
so if you would have a list of questions for Dr. Scheid, you please submit them in writing, and she will respond to them or call you, whatever is easier for you. But I think within the 3-minute time frame, my guess is we shouldn't be going back and forth in terms of individual questions.
I just wanted to
Okay,
actually, that's exactly what I just wanted to do, was to email questions
Perfect.
and come back after the fact, because I just needed to understand what I had in front
Yes,
of me.
excellent.
There is, however, something I noticed, and this continues to happen year over year when I come to these presentations. We seem to look at data in a way that generally, most people don't look at data in the outside world, outside of education. There's no XY axis here, okay? You can't tell me, and it's not here, how many kids took the SAT. Last year, the year before, how many took it. So I have no percentage of change reference. I have no percentage of change reference for ACTs. I have no statisticals that go beyond a 3-year profile. But I know for a fact, because I've done the calculations myself, over the last 6 years, we have been steadily going down. So we don't have a big picture perspective here. But I'm constantly looking at this data and understanding it from the perspective of some of the questions asked about what are we doing to fix it. Because I keep hearing we're getting there, and we do these modified rollouts. And I understand that teachers need to be taught how to do things, but why can't we figure out how to get all the 5th grade teachers together to do it at the same time? Why do we have a differential between one building and the next? Because see, that's what's leading to your problems here. You fix it in one elementary school or 2 elementary schools, but when they get to middle school, they're merging with kids who didn't have that advantage. So it's almost a self-defeating task. If you're gonna at least test pilot something, well, test pilot it that it goes across the standard for all the kids in that elementary school that wind up in that middle school. Because then you'd actually have a measurable reason to say it was or it wasn't successful. We're not thinking strategically here. And that's what I keep running into every year with this. Because I keep coming and I keep asking questions and I keep looking at these numbers and I say to myself, okay, the SAT and the ACT, how many kids took the test? Is participation up or down from year over year? And these scores, are they cumulative for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? Because see, in 10th grade, the success rate on your ACT and your SAT scores are not really that applicable. What's really applicable is when you wind up at the end of junior year and at the beginning of senior year. That's the test score that, because they will have learned what they needed to succeed at that test. See, so I'm just trying to hope maybe we can get to the point where this data becomes something we can actually, on the outside world, use and learn from, and parents can help. But I would say this in conclusion. I love the education world where alphabet soup is its own little genre. But for the rest of us, don't have that background, but want to actively participate, it took me 2 hours tonight to figure out LEP, finally, limited English proficiency. Okay? There's no guide in here that tells me what that acronym is. So if you want people to help and participate, you have to give them the tools to do that too. And the language of the educator world is not what the average parent knows.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock.
Yes, I
What's that?
Sue Furlong, West Rock Hill Township. When your score changes from 70 to 75, that is not a 5% change, that is a 5-point change. Second year in a row. I noticed that you're talking about the data at the building level and you're leaving it to the principal and things like that. I know our principals are fairly busy. I'm thinking that it seems to me like it's not happening. So maybe if that's, he's got administrative responsibilities. I know he's got academic as well. But we pay people to be in charge of our academics. We pay them all 120 grand plus. And I remember when I was on the board and before I was on the board, that just meeting after meeting after meeting, the director of curriculum was always saying, well, we've got to change our alignment in this topic, in these grades, and we got to do it over here. And I mean, it was just constant. And I got irritated with the state because it was like, can't you leave things alone long enough for us to, get our curriculum in order and keep it that way? But we were constantly improving, reacting with our curriculum so that our kids would have the knowledge before they took the test, not after they took the test. And, I don't know if that's part of the problem here or not, but I've watched the scores go down for the last 4 years, and now we're sort of happy because, oh, look, we're stable. Yeah, well, we're stable in a trough. I don't think that's great. I don't want to be stable when I'm at the bottom. And, I do look at the other districts. They're not stable where we're stable. They're stable up here, okay? It's like we can't chew gum and walk at the same time. We've got to either study our data or implement a program. We're not, I just, and again, back to the thing where, okay, we're going to do it here, but we're afraid to do it over here at the same time. No, if you're not getting results, get rid of it. If you think this is better, then do it better. Across the board. If it was my kid and I didn't get the better part, I would not be very happy. And I tell you, when I look at your scores at South, I didn't hear one thing here about bringing up that individual building. And it needs help. Okay, it is behind the other buildings, and it doesn't sound like anybody's addressing discrepancies between particular buildings. That's about it. And I'll go back to what was previously said. I also was like, and I've been at this for a while, when you use an acronym, usually you spell it out, and the first time you write out what it is, and then you put the acronym. And then after that, you use the acronym. Or you have a little star beside it, and down at the bottom there's a little star, and it explains the acronym. When you don't do that, you're being rude to your reader. Okay? Just rude. And it does happen a lot, and it shouldn't happen at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?